The morning sun touched the tall glass tower in the center of the city. Inside that tower stood a company that was known across the country for its success. The company's secret was a powerful machine that worked faster than 100 men. It was the heart of their business. Without it, the company would stop. On that day, the machine failed. It stood still, its lights dark and its sound gone. Workers gathered around it, their faces filled with fear. They had never seen it stop before. Some whispered that the company could lose millions if the problem was not solved quickly. Others feared that Mira, the CEO, would not forgive anyone if the machine stayed silent for long. Mira was a young woman, but also strong and bold. People respected her because she made smart decisions that kept the company on top. At the same time, they feared her humor. Mira often mixed jokes with her orders, and no one could tell when she was serious. When she came down to the floor and saw the machine quiet, she laughed in her sharp way and said, "Fix this broken machine and I will marry you." Her words echoed across the room. Some laughed nervously, while others looked at her with wide eyes. They knew she was joking, but the weight of her challenge filled the air. Several engineers had already tried. They opened the panels, checked the wires, pressed the buttons, and tested the systems. Nothing worked. Each one gave up, shaking his head in defeat. Mira grew impatient. She was calm on the outside, but inside she felt the storm of worry. If the machine did not work, all her plans for the month would fail. Far from the shining tower on the edge of the city stood a small workshop. It was not beautiful or famous, but inside it lived a man with special skill. His name was Ravi. He was 35 years old and known as a mechanic who never turned away a problem. People came to him with machines that others could not repair. Ravi had a gift. He could hear the language of machines. By listening to their sounds, by touching their surfaces, he could understand what they needed. That day, one of Mira's assistants remembered Ravi. With fear in his voice, he hurried to the small workshop and begged Ravi to come. "Our company is falling apart. The machine is dead. We have tried everyone, but no one can save it. If you fail, we will all lose." Ravi wiped the grease from his hands and looked at the man. He had never been inside a rich company's tower. He was not chasing fame or wealth. He lived a simple life, fixing what was broken. But when he saw the desperation in the assistant's eyes, he agreed. He closed his workshop and followed the man. When Ravi entered the tall glass building, people turned to look at him. Some doubted him, whispering that a street mechanic could never do what trained engineers could not. Others, tired and hopeless, looked at him with faint hope. Mira stood in front of the silent machine. She raised her brow and asked, "You? Do you believe you can repair what my engineers failed to fix?" Ravi did not boast. He only said in his calm voice, "Every machine speaks in its own way. I will listen to it." With steady steps, he walked toward the broken giant. The workers watched him closely, their breath caught in their throats. The joke Mira had spoken still lingered in their minds, but Ravi did not care about such words. He did not come for jokes or promises. He came because a machine had called for help and he could not ignore it. He placed his hand on the cold surface of the machine. For a long moment, the room was silent. Everyone waited, and in that silence, Ravi began to hear what no one else could. It was the first whisper of the machine's hidden heart. The silent machine stood tall in the wide hall like a sleeping giant. Everyone waited as Ravi bent down to inspect its panels. His hands were steady, his eyes calm. He did not rush because he knew rushing never helped. He treated machines the way a doctor treated patients, with patience and respect. The workers around him whispered to each other. Some said this man had no chance. Others said there was a reason he had been called, and maybe he was different from the engineers who had failed. Mira, standing with folded arms, watched closely. She did not speak, but her eyes followed every move he made. Ravi slowly pressed his ear to the metal frame of the machine. He closed his eyes and listened. In the silence, he could almost hear tiny echoes like faint breaths of a creature that had not fully died. He tapped gently, testing for hidden cracks. Then he pulled out a small light from his pocket and peered into the machine's inner parts. The machine was complex, full of wires, gears, and hidden systems. It was built with technology far beyond what Ravi usually worked with in his small workshop. But he was not afraid. To him, every machine was like a puzzle, no matter how big. After some time, Ravi asked for simple tools. The company had expensive equipment, but he only wanted a screwdriver, a small hammer, and a wire cutter. The workers looked at him in surprise. One of them said, "Sir, we have advanced repair kits." Why do you only ask for these basic tools? Ravi replied, a machine does not always need advanced tools. It needs the right touch. He opened one panel and studied the inside. He noticed dust gathered in places where no dust should be. He saw wires bent in ways that could block signals. He saw a gear that was dry and needed oil. To others, these things looked small, but Ravi knew small things often stopped big machines. Mira finally spoke, her voice calm but sharp. You think dust and dry gears are the reason this giant has stopped? My engineers looked at every part, and they did not find a cause. Ravi lifted his eyes and said, sometimes people look but do not see. Machines hide their secrets from those who rush, but if you give them time, they reveal everything. His words made the workers quiet. They watched as he cleaned the dust, straightened the wires, and carefully oiled the dry gear. His movements were slow but sure, like a man who knew every step before he took it. Hours passed and the room grew heavy with waiting. Some workers sighed, believing he would fail just like the others, but Mira continued to watch him, her mind filled with curiosity. There was something about this man. He did not seem nervous under her gaze. He did not try to impress anyone. He only focused on the machine. Finally, Ravi stood up and wiped his hands. He pressed a button to test his first repairs. The machine made a low sound, a soft hum that echoed through the hall. For the first time that day, the giant stirred. The workers gasped, their eyes wide with hope. But after a few seconds, the sound stopped again. The machine went quiet, its lights fading back into silence. A wave of disappointment filled the hall. Some workers shook their heads. One whispered, I knew it. It was only luck for a moment. Mira did not speak, but she stepped closer. Ravi looked at the machine with calm eyes. He was not upset. He only said, this was the first test. The machine is alive, but something deeper holds it back. I must go further. He placed his hand on the surface again, almost as if he was speaking to it. His eyes grew sharper. He knew now that the machine's problem was not only on the outside. Something inside its hidden heart was broken, something no one had yet touched. The workers looked at him with mixed feelings. Some doubted more than before. Others felt that if anyone could find the answer, it was this quiet man who treated the machine as if it were alive. Mira, watching him, felt a spark of interest she had never felt for any of her engineers. His calmness, his patience, and his respect for the silent giant made her wonder if her careless joke about marriage would turn into something far greater than she had imagined. The room was quiet after the first test. The workers who had hoped for success now looked down, unsure of what to believe. The brief hum of the machine had given them hope, but its silence had quickly returned. Ravi did not leave his place. He placed his hand back on the cold surface of the giant and thought carefully. He knew that the first signs of life meant the machine was not lost. It was only trapped by a problem no one had reached yet. He asked the workers to bring him every record they had of the machine. Old manuals, blueprints, and repair reports were placed in front of him. The engineers had left behind notes filled with technical language and complicated numbers. Ravi sat on the floor reading page after page, his eyes scanning for what others had missed. Mira walked closer and asked, Do you understand these documents? Even trained engineers struggled with them. Ravi nodded slightly. Words can be complex, but machines are simple. They only need to work or not work. The truth is always inside the machine. These papers only give me a path. He set the papers aside and returned to the panels. This time he opened a deeper section that no one had dared to touch. The parts inside were delicate, full of fine wires and hidden sensors. It looked like the heart of the machine. The workers gasped. One said, Be careful. If you damage that part, the machine may never start again. Ravi replied calmly, If the heart is sick, the body cannot rise. We must help the heart. He began to trace each wire with his finger, his eyes following the lines carefully. He found one that was darker than the others, as if heat had burned it slightly. He touched it gently, and the wire felt weak, almost ready to break. This is it, Ravi whispered to himself. He turned to the workers and asked for a new wire of the same type. They searched quickly and brought it to him. With steady hands, he removed the weak wire and replaced it with the new one. Then he carefully tightened each connection. Mira watched in silence. She noticed the way Ravi worked, not with fear but with quiet respect. It was as if he was speaking to the machine, promising it that he would bring it back to life. When the replacement was complete, Ravi stood up again. He pressed the button once more. The room filled with a low hum stronger than before. The lights on the machine flickered, some glowing brighter than they had earlier. The workers cheered, clapping their hands in excitement, but the joy lasted only a few moments. The hum grew louder, then suddenly dropped into silence again. The lights dimmed, leaving the machine quiet once more. The workers groaned in frustration. "Again it fails," one said. "It is hopeless," Ravi shook his head. His eyes were not filled with defeat. "No. This time we reached closer." The machine tried to wake. Something else still holds it back, something hidden even deeper. He asked for water and sat on the floor for a few minutes, resting his hands. Mira stepped forward and asked quietly, "Why do you keep going when others have already failed? You do not work here. You have nothing to lose if this machine stays broken." Ravi looked up at her and answered, "Because every machine deserves another chance. People give up too soon. But I believe if something was once alive, it can live again. That is why I stay." Mira felt something shift inside her. She had built her company on results, speed, and profit. Yet here was a man who cared for a machine as if it had a soul. His words were simple, but they carried a weight she could not ignore. After his short rest, Ravi rose again. He asked for more light in the hall so he could see every detail. Workers adjusted lamps until the inside of the machine shone bright. Ravi leaned closer, searching with sharp eyes. At last he saw it. Hidden behind a set of panels was a small circuit board, almost invisible to the eye. A piece of it was cracked. It was not visible to most people, but Ravi's careful search had found it. "This," he said softly, "is the true heart of the problem." The workers leaned forward, trying to see. Mira's eyes fixed on him. The room grew silent again as Ravi prepared to touch the most delicate part of the machine. Everyone knew the next step would decide everything. The workers leaned closer, their eyes fixed on the small circuit board Ravi had found. It was hidden so deep inside the machine that most people would have missed it. A thin crack ran across it, almost invisible in the dim light. Only someone with patience and sharp eyes could have noticed it. Ravi studied the board carefully. He knew this was not an ordinary problem. A broken wire or a dry gear could be fixed quickly, but a damaged board required more care. He asked the workers to bring him a soldering tool, fine wire, and a replacement chip if they had one. The workers hurried to the storage room. When they returned, Ravi took the tools in his steady hands. He began to clean the board gently, removing dust and checking the lines. His movements were slow, like an artist painting on delicate glass. The workers stood in silence, afraid to disturb him. Mira watched closely. She noticed how he bent over the machine with full focus, not distracted by the whispers or the weight of her eyes. He worked as if the world outside did not exist. For the first time, Mira felt respect growing stronger inside her for this quiet mechanic who had walked in from the street. Ravi placed a small wire across the crack and soldered it with care. The smell of heated metal filled the air. When the connection was secure, he nodded to himself. But he was not done. He tested the board with a small tool, listening to the faint signals. Some lines worked well, but others remained weak. "This board is old," he said calmly. "It must be replaced soon. But for now, I can give it strength to work again." The workers exchanged nervous glances. One of them asked, "Will it last long enough for the company to recover?" Ravi replied, "It will last long enough to keep the machine alive, but you must promise to care for it. Machines fail when people forget them." His words were simple, yet they carried a lesson. Mira listened quietly, her sharp mind turning over what he had said. She had always pushed her company forward, demanding speed and results. But perhaps she had forgotten that even machines needed care and respect, just like people. After finishing the repair, Ravi carefully placed the board back into its place. He closed the panels one by one, making sure each screw was tight. His hands moved with confidence as if he already knew the machine would respond. The hall grew tense. Workers held their breath. Mira stood tall, her eyes fixed on the man and the silent giant. Ravi stepped back and pressed the main button. A soft hum rose again, deeper than before. Lights began to glow across the machine, steady this time, not flickering as before. The floor vibrated gently as the giant started to wake. The sound grew stronger, filling the hall with power. The workers gasped in wonder. One shouted, "It is alive!" Another clapped his hands, tears shining in his eyes. The machine that had refused to move for days now roared back to life under Ravi's touch. Mira allowed herself a small smile, though she kept her arms crossed. Inside, however, she felt relief washing over her like a wave. She had made a joke earlier, but now she could not ignore the truth. This man had done what her engineers could not. The machine settled into a steady rhythm, its lights shining bright. Ravi listened closely. The sound was strong, though he could still sense weakness inside. He knew the repair would not last forever, but it had given the company time. He turned to Mira and said calmly, "The machine works again, but you must replace that board soon. If you wait too long, it will fail again and maybe no one will save it next time." The workers looked at him with admiration. To them, he was no longer just a street mechanic. He was the man who had saved their company. Mira stepped forward, her sharp gaze fixed on him. "You have done the impossible. Tell me, Ravi, what is it that drives you? Money, fame, or something else?" Ravi shook his head. "I do not seek wealth or name. I only care for what is broken. Every machine deserves a chance to live again. That is all." His words echoed in the hall, simple but powerful. Mira felt her heart stir in a way she had not expected. She remembered her own careless promise spoken in jest, and for the first time she wondered if her joke was about to change her life. The machine was alive again, humming like a great heart beating inside the tall tower. Workers moved around it with smiles on their faces. For days they had carried the weight of fear, but now they felt light, as if the future of the company had returned to them. Some shook Ravi's hand with respect. Others bowed slightly, whispering words of thanks. Ravi accepted their gratitude with calm humility. He was not a man who liked the center of attention. For him, repairing the machine had been no different from fixing the smallest motor in his workshop. It was simply what he knew how to do. Mira, however, saw things differently. She stood in front of her workers, her eyes sharp but softer than usual. She remembered her own words from that morning. Her voice had been playful when she said, "Fix this machine and I will marry you." At the time, it had been nothing more than a careless joke. Yet now the man before her had truly done what no one else could. The workers had not forgotten the joke either. As Ravi wiped his hands, one of them whispered loudly, "The CEO promised marriage." Another laughed nervously, and soon the hall filled with quiet murmurs. Mira raised her hand and the voices stopped at once. She turned her gaze toward Ravi. "Do you know what I said before you arrived?" she asked. Ravi shook his head. "I heard nothing. I only came to help." Her lips curved slightly. "I told this room that whoever repaired this machine would earn my hand in marriage. Of course, I did not expect anyone to succeed." The workers held their breath, waiting to see how Ravi would answer. But Ravi did not look surprised. He did not blush or tremble. He only said with steady calm, "Jokes are not binding. Your words carried no promise to me. I came because a machine was broken and needed care. That is all." The hall grew silent again. Mira studied him, trying to understand the man who stood before her. Most people in her world would have grasped such an opportunity with greedy hands. They would have reminded her of her words, demanded rewards, or tried to gain her favor. Yet this man wanted nothing. Ravi was already turning to leave, ready to return to his small workshop. But Mira stopped him. "Wait," she said, her voice stronger than before. "You may not care for jokes, but I do not forget when my words are heard by so many. You have done more than anyone for this company. I cannot let you walk away without honor." She looked at her workers. "Prepare a reward for him, something worthy of what he has done." But Ravi shook his head again. "I do not need rewards. Keep your money, your gifts, your fame. I have my workshop. I have enough." The workers stared at him with disbelief. Mira's eyes softened further, and for the first time, she felt curiosity turning into admiration. Who was this man who refused everything she offered? She spoke gently, not as a CEO, but as a woman. "Then tell me, what do you want?" Ravi thought for a moment before answering. "I only ask that you remember what this machine taught you today. Even the strongest can fail without care. Do not forget it again." His words fell like a lesson in the hall. Mira, who had built her empire on ambition and speed, felt them strike deep inside her. For years she had demanded more and more from both people and machines, rarely pausing to consider their limits. Now, hearing this simple mechanic speak with such truth, she felt her pride soften. The workers watched the two in silence, sensing that something important was unfolding between them. Mira did not answer right away. She only nodded slowly, as if making a quiet promise to herself. Finally, she said, You are not like anyone I have met, Ravi. You came when we had no hope, and you gave life back to our future. Whether you accept my words or not, I will not forget the promise I made. Perhaps one day you will see that I was not joking. Ravi looked at her calmly with eyes that carried no greed or fear. If that day comes, it will not be because of a joke. It will be because of truth. With that, he bowed slightly to the room and turned once more toward the doors. The workers parted to let him pass, their eyes filled with respect. Mira stood still, watching him leave, her mind racing with thoughts she had never allowed herself before. The machine hummed behind her, alive once more. But it was not the sound of the giant that stayed in her heart. It was the quiet strength of the man who had walked away without asking for anything in return. Days passed, and the company returned to its rhythm. The machine worked again, and the workers no longer feared losing their jobs. Mira's plans for the month moved forward, and her name once again shone brightly in the city. To everyone, it seemed like the crisis had ended, but Mira herself did not feel the same. Every time she passed by the machine, she remembered the quiet man who had brought it back to life. His words echoed in her mind. Even the strongest can fail without care. She realized that those words were not only about the machine, they were about people too. Late at night, when the offices grew empty, Mira often stood by her window and looked at the city lights. She thought of Ravi in his small workshop, far from the glass towers, working with grease on his hands and patience in his heart. She had met many men in her life, men who chased her wealth or her name. But Ravi was different. He had refused her rewards, ignored her fame, and walked away without looking back. That mystery pulled at her heart. One morning, unable to hold back her curiosity, Mira decided to visit him. She told no one, not even her assistants. She changed her formal suit for a simple dress and left the tower without her usual guards. Her driver left her near the edge of the city, and she walked the last stretch alone. Ravi's workshop was small, with walls that showed years of hard work. The sound of tools echoed inside, and the smell of oil filled the air. Mira stepped in quietly. She saw Ravi bent over a motor, his hands steady, his focus deep. He did not notice her at first. When he finally looked up, surprise flickered in his eyes. He stood quickly, wiping his hands. "Madam, what are you doing here?" Mira smiled faintly. "I wanted to see the place where you do your work." "May I come in?" Ravi hesitated, but then nodded. "Of course." She walked around the workshop, studying the shelves filled with tools, the engines in pieces, and the small desk covered with notes. Everything was simple, yet everything carried his touch. She felt more impressed here than in her own shining tower. "You live a very different life from mine," she said softly. Ravi smiled. "Different does not mean less. I have enough here. Machines come to me broken, and I give them life again. That is enough purpose for me." Mira looked at him with interest. "Do you never dream of more? A bigger workshop? Richer clients? A name known across the city?" Ravi shook his head. "Dreams are not always about size. A machine does not care if it is in a palace or a street shop. It only cares if it works. I am the same. My dream is simple. To fix what is broken, to give back what was lost." His words touched her again. She had lived in a world where everything was measured in growth, speed, and power. Yet this man found peace in simplicity. They sat on 2 stools in the corner of the workshop. Mira asked him about his life, and he told her about his years of learning, his failures, and the way he listened to machines as if they spoke to him. He never once spoke of wealth or success. As the morning passed, Mira realized she felt lighter in his workshop than she ever did in her office. There were no deadlines here, no heavy decisions, no walls of glass separating her from people. Only the quiet voice of a man who saw the world differently. When it was time to leave, Mira stood at the doorway and looked back at him. "You are not like others, Ravi. You do not chase what they chase. Perhaps that is why you did the impossible." Ravi simply nodded. Perhaps I only listened when others did not. As Mira walked back to her car, she felt a strange warmth in her chest. She knew she would return again. For the first time in years, she was not thinking about business, money, or success. She was thinking about a mechanic in a small workshop and the truth he carried in his quiet hands. After her visit to Ravi's workshop, Mira could not stop thinking about him. Every time she walked through her office or passed the giant machine, she remembered the calm eyes, the steady hands, and the quiet strength of the mechanic who had brought life back to her company. She began to realize that her joke had awakened something she had not expected. Ravi, on the other hand, continued his simple life. He repaired machines, helped people in the neighborhood, and never thought much about the CEO who had made a careless promise. For him, life was about solving problems, not chasing fame or attention. Yet he remembered Mira's visit. She had come without guards, without orders, just to see his world. That curiosity and honesty had impressed him, though he would never admit it openly. Days passed and the city began to notice the difference. The company's machine worked perfectly, producing results faster than ever. Mira's employees whispered about Ravi's skills, and many wanted to meet the man who had changed everything. But Mira only smiled quietly when asked. She wanted no one to interfere in her own thoughts, no one to know the growing respect she felt for him. One afternoon, she received a small note delivered by a worker. It read simply, "Your machine is ready for inspection." Ravi, she smiled, feeling a sudden warmth. She decided to visit his workshop again, this time with more intention. She wanted to learn, not only about machines, but about the quiet man who seemed so different from everyone she knew. When Mira entered the workshop, Ravi was repairing an old engine. He looked up, slightly surprised but calm. "Madam," he said, "you come again." "I wanted to see your work," Mira replied, "and perhaps to understand your way of thinking. You have changed my company, and I want to understand the mind behind it." Ravi nodded silently. He gestured toward the corner where engines were lined up. "Machines are honest. They show you what is wrong. People are different. They hide it. But if you listen carefully, you can understand both." Mira walked among the engines, touching the surfaces, watching Ravi work. She was fascinated by his attention to detail, the way he noticed things others ignored. Each movement was precise, thoughtful, and respectful. She realized that his patience was rare in a world that moved too fast. "You see the world differently," she said quietly. "Most people I know only care about speed and success. You care about balance and care." Ravi smiled faintly. "I only care about what matters. If a machine or a person is broken, it needs attention. Nothing else is as important at that moment." Mira thought about her own life. She had always rushed decisions, pushing people and projects forward without stopping to consider the small things. Watching Ravi work made her wonder if she had missed too much in her own life. They worked side by side for a few hours. Mira learned simple repairs and adjustments, guided patiently by Ravi. She realized that her own hands could follow his instructions, that understanding came not from speed but from listening. The more time she spent with him, the more she admired his calm mind and careful heart. Before leaving, Mira looked at him and said, "Ravi, I came to your workshop to understand machines. But I think I am learning about something else as well." Ravi looked up calmly. "And what is that?" "About patience, about respect, and about seeing what others ignore," she replied. Her voice was softer than before, honest and thoughtful. Ravi nodded, a small smile crossing his face. "If you carry this lesson, it will help you more than any machine ever could." As Mira walked back to her car, she felt lighter than she had in years. The distance between her world and Ravi's small workshop seemed smaller now. She realized that admiration had quietly turned into something deeper, something she could not yet name. And Ravi, standing among his engines, felt a strange awareness that the CEO from the tall glass tower had touched his world in ways he had not expected. For the first time, he wondered if his quiet life could also hold space for someone else. Weeks passed after Mira's last visit to Ravi's workshop. The giant machine in her company continued to work perfectly, producing results that amazed everyone. The workers admired the quiet mechanic from afar, and the company thrived. Yet Mira found herself thinking more about Ravi than the machine itself. She had grown curious about his life, his calm mind, and the way he treated every problem with care. His presence had left a mark on her, a gentle reminder that strength was not only in power or speed but also in patience and respect. One bright morning, Mira decided to visit him again. This time she walked into his workshop without hesitation, smiling as she greeted him. "Ravi," she said warmly, "I wanted to see you. I realize now that your world is different from mine, and I want to learn more from it." Ravi looked up from the motor he was repairing. His eyes were calm as always, and he nodded slightly. "Madam, welcome. You come often now." "I do," she admitted. "I think I am learning things I did not know I needed to learn." Ravi listened quietly as Mira watched him work. He showed her how to adjust the gears and clean the engines carefully. She followed his instructions, amazed at how much difference a small adjustment could make. Every movement was precise and every touch carried care. As the hours passed, they spoke about life beyond machines. Mira told him about her company, her childhood dreams, and the responsibilities she carried. Ravi shared stories from his workshop, about people who brought broken machines to him and how he felt when he gave them life again. Neither spoke about wealth or power. Their conversation was simple yet meaningful, filled with respect and understanding. By late afternoon, Mira stood to leave. "Ravi," she said softly, "I have come to understand more than machines. I have come to understand you." Ravi paused, his hands resting on the motor. "I am just a mechanic. My life is simple." "But simplicity has its own strength," Mira replied. "You showed me that patience and care are as important as power and speed. You did the impossible not for fame or reward but because it was right. That is why I respect you." Ravi looked at her quietly, a small smile forming. For the first time he felt that someone truly saw the way he lived, the principles he followed, and the quiet joy he found in helping others. He realized that Mira was different too. She was strong yet willing to learn, ambitious yet honest, and willing to admit that her world could change with new understanding. Mira stepped closer. "Ravi, I made a careless promise long ago. I joked about marriage, but my words now have meaning. Not because of obligation, but because I see your heart. You are honest, kind, and true. I would like to know you more as a person, not because of titles or positions." Ravi's eyes widened slightly. He had never expected this. He had not sought it, nor did he desire it, but he felt a warmth in his chest, a recognition of a bond forming between them. He nodded slowly. "If we walk together, it will be with respect, honesty, and understanding." "I can accept that." Mira smiled, feeling a sense of relief and happiness. She realized that the man who had repaired a machine was now repairing her understanding of life and trust. From that day forward, their bond grew quietly. Mira would visit the workshop often, learning from Ravi, observing his calm approach to life and work. Ravi continued his simple life, but now with Mira by his side sometimes, appreciating the world she had built yet untouched by its rush. The giant machine in the company worked flawlessly, but it was no longer the most important thing in Mira's mind. The real change was in her heart, and the connection she had formed with Ravi, a mechanic who did the impossible and taught her the meaning of patience, care, and respect. In the end, it was not just the machine that was fixed. Two lives had met, and in that meeting something extraordinary began, built not on promises made in jest but on truth, trust, and quiet understanding.